Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Iran threatens retaliation after the US joins Israel in striking nuclear sites, including a bunker buster which hit Fordow. As missiles fly towards Israel, Trump floats regime change, protests erupt in the US, and oil markets brace for the Strait of Hormuz closure. Israel says it targeted military sites in Tehran as Iran's Red Crescent reports a strike near its building on day 11 of the conflict. Loud explosions were also heard in Jerusalem after missiles from Iran prompted Israel to urge civilians to take shelter. Ukraine says Russia launched 352 drones and 16 missiles overnight, killing at least 7 in Kyiv and its suburbs. Zelensky says Iranian-made Shaheeds and possibly North Korean missiles were used as fires and destruction hit residential areas. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi arrives in Moscow with a letter from Supreme Leader Khamenei urging Putin to boost support after US strikes. With Trump and Israel talking regime change, Moscow weighs its role in a second war while already deep in Ukraine. The European Union has strongly condemned the suicide bombing that killed 22 in a Damascus church, calling it a cowardly attack on all Syrians. Turkey's President Erdogan vowed to block extremists from dragging Syria back into chaos after the Islamic State-linked blast. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba plans to cancel his NATO summit trip, a source says, as key meetings with the IP4 and President Trump are unlikely. Japanese media reports that the move reflects growing doubts about the summit's regional engagement plans. Iran says it hanged Mohammad Amin Mardavi Este on Monday for allegedly spying for Israel as war between the two countries enters day 11. The judiciary accused him of sharing intelligence with what it called the Zionist regime. And Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra begins a cabinet shake-up as pressure mounts over a leaked call and growing political unrest. The move comes amid a deepening judicial standoff and coalition instability in Bangkok. Now we start in the Middle East. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has arrived in Moscow today for high-level talks with President Vladimir Putin. The discussions come just days after major airstrikes targeted Iran's nuclear and military sites. Araghchi emphasized that Iran and Russia are closely coordinating their positions amid the ongoing regional escalation. Russian officials condemned the US strikes as irresponsible and warned against further military intervention. Despite condemning the attacks, Russia has not committed to providing military aid to Iran. Earlier, President Putin suggested possible mediation between Iran and Israel, but later clarified he is only suggesting ideas, not acting as a mediator. Iran's foreign ministry highlighted the importance of its strategic partnership with Russia during this crisis. Araghchi's meeting with Putin aims to strengthen diplomatic ties and discuss regional stability. Both sides stressed the significance of consultations amid rising tensions following the US and Israeli attacks on Iranian targets. This comes as Iran fired 8 missiles in 4 volleys in the first round of attacks, says the Israeli military, most of which were intercepted, but one hit near Israel Electric Company, causing power disruption. Sirens sounded across Israel as missile barrages continued, while Iran calls attacks a betrayal of diplomacy. The situation remains highly volatile as diplomatic efforts continue alongside ongoing military exchanges. We're now joined by Peter Baum, who's the foreign editor of the Weekly Blitz, joining us live from London to discuss this further. Peter, thank you very much for joining us. I wanted to start with the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's trip to Moscow. What are your thoughts on this, and what exactly do you think Iran is seeking from the Kremlin?
Good afternoon, Thomas. I think this is a sign of Iranian desperation. In your analysis, in your introduction, you stated quite rightly that the one of the reasons for the trip of Arachi, the foreign minister, to Moscow, was to strengthen diplomatic ties. Now, let's be honest, the ties between Iran and Russia could not be stronger, excuse me, than they are currently and have been over the last decade. So the idea that ties are going to be further strengthened by this trip is an absurdity. The trip, I think, is rather more than Iran's grave disappointment in her ally in Moscow not to come out in stronger terms about the US strike on its nuclear facilities. Putin has been very quiet, to say the least, condemning the strike, saying it was irresponsible. But I think that's all Iran is going to get out of the meeting. Clearly, Putin is not going to send in troops to help Iran with or even missile systems, because Russia is under constant pressure and is still at war with Ukraine themselves. In effect, Russia gets a lot of its missile supplies from Iran. And of course, that supply line has been devastated. So I think this is a bit of a show of diplomatic desperation. Iran would like further assistance on the diplomatic front to put pressure on the UN, etc. But I don't think the meeting is going to achieve much to assist Iran's further aims and objectives in this conflict.
Peter, this obviously comes amid a backdrop of the Ukraine war, from which, since the start of the Trump presidency, there's been a warming between Moscow and Washington. Despite condemning these strikes from the United States, Russia hasn't promised any military aid support to its longtime ally of Iran. Do you think that Donald Trump is the reason for this and this kind of new, I won't say relationship, but this new interactions between the United States and Russia is the reason for that?
Absolutely, Thomas, I do indeed. It's clear that Trump and Putin, despite their differences, do have a rapport. And Trump is less aggressive towards Russia's aims in Ukraine than previous US administrations have been. Putin recognizes that, and further recognises that Iran is and her proxies have been, if not entirely defeated, devastated. Putin realises that there's no point in backing Iran against Trump and Israel at this stage. So I think the Iranian, going back to your previous question and following on from this question, I do indeed think it's Iranian desperation, and I do indeed think that the Putin-Trump rapport, let's say, is going to severely disappoint the Iranian objectives in this meeting.
Peter, we're seeing not two sides form here, but alliances are aligning. What are your thoughts about this spiralling into something broader? You obviously have Western powers condemning Iranians, the fact that they the nuclear program development. However, not all-out support for the US action. What are your thoughts in the broader scope of this conflict internationally? How maybe other players could possibly be brought in, whether that's directly or indirectly? What are your thoughts, Peter?
Things there, Thomas. Firstly, I think although the statements emanating from, let's say, the EU and the United Kingdom have been mildly supportive of Trump, they have certainly not condemned the US for this action, but I truly believe that behind the scenes they are secretly very pleased with what Donald Trump has done. Now, in terms of whether this is going to widen into a more regional conflict, that is really how far Iran is prepared to go. I don't think she can defeat Israel militarily. She can still cause damage, but I think as each day goes by, Iran's position is weakening. So, what is left for her to do? Well, we have heard that there are Iranian terrorist cells within various countries in Europe. And if Iran were to activate those cells, that's the only way I think the conflict can be broadened. But as far as the Israel-Iran conflict is concerned, I think that is going to be between those two parties and only those two parties. I don't see any other regional powers getting involved, certainly not on the side of Iran, and only the US will support Israel in this conflict.
So here we have, thank you very much, Peter. Here we have some live visuals from Moscow. As you can see there, the Russian president sat at the same table along with the Iranian foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi. He has been on a certain tour, Moscow being his trip after he has been to that of Europe. He joins the Russian president for support, along reportedly bringing a letter from Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini. We don't have any information about what is contained in that letter yet, but as soon as we do, we will inform you. Okay, but we will bring you everything in regards to Araghchi's visit to Moscow as soon as we have the information. We move on once again and we stay with the developing situation in Israel and Iran. Tensions are rising in the Middle East after US strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, with Iran's parliament now backing a move to close the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most crucial oil routes. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has urged China, Iran's largest oil buyer, to intervene and stop Tehran from closing the strait, warning that it would be, quote, economic suicide for Iran and a blow to global markets. Before we head into the discussion, let's first understand a bit more about the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most strategic and vulnerable oil choke points, and it's vital to global trade and energy security. Situated between Iran and Oman, this narrow waterway connects the Gulf to the Arabian Sea. At its narrowest point, it's just 33 kilometers wide, with a shipping channel of only 3 kilometers across. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a geographical feature, it's a global lifeline carrying nearly 1/5 of the world's oil supply, up to 21 million barrels a day. It's essential to energy security from Asia to Europe. OPEC giants like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Iraq, and even Iran itself export most of their crude oil through this choke point. The US Fifth Fleet, based in Bahrain, patrols the area to keep commerce moving. If Iran closes Hormuz, it could spike global oil prices and hit the US economy hard. But it would also hurt Iran's own exports and its main buyer, China. America's top diplomat, Marco Rubio, has urged Beijing to pressure Tehran, calling it a closure economic suicide. Tankers are already turning around and the world is watching closely. We're once again joined by Peter Baum, who's the foreign editor of the Weekly Blitz, to discuss this as well. Peter, this is a dramatic move from the Iranian regime and ultimately now the Iranian parliament. Since they voted for it, it only has to go through the Iranian judiciary for it to transpire. If Iran does close this state, who loses more, the global economy or the Iranian people themselves?
The answer, Thomas, is both. Now, clearly, after the fiasco with the tariffs toing and froing, and now some kind of agreement between the USA and those partners which she was going to impose tariffs on, the last thing the United States wants, and what China wants, for example, is to further damage their economies. So I believe in this instance, the Chinese, who have the most influence over Iran economically, will certainly put pressure on Iran not to close those straits, because from everyone's perspective, that will be very damaging. Now, if the Iranian judiciary do decide to rubber stamp the closure of the Hormuz Straits, going back to the discussion we had previously about other regional players getting involved, this could well mean that the United Kingdom would get involved, as she did some months ago, actually bombing the Houthis in Yemen. We could see the French getting involved as well. I think that's possibly the only way that the conflict will expand, and in that case, it wouldn't be a direct Israel-Iran conflict. It would be Iran economically versus the rest of the world. In this instance, I think China is going to be the main player who will pressure Iran sufficiently for them maybe to take slight action, but not to expand to such an extent that the shipping lanes will be closed to the world at large.
Peter, do you think that Iran is using the closure of this crucial waterway as a bargaining chip or as a weapon, and can it afford to do so itself?
It certainly will be using it as a bargaining chip and an economic weapon, if you like, but it cannot afford to do it. I've just been interviewing with some friends very close to the Iranian situation, and as we speak, Thomas, the official rate of exchange of the rial to the dollar is between 40 and 43,000. It changes week by week, but between those parameters. The unofficial exchange rate, the black market rate for the rial, is now over 1 million rials to the dollar. The Iranian currency is absolutely worthless, and basically people are just, for exchange of goods, bartering. I'll buy a jar of coffee from you if you take a pound of tomatoes from me. So economically, if the only lifeline for Iran to assist their dire economic situation is retaining the Straits of Hormuz open, it would be absurd if they closed it, which would further damage their own economy. But the mullahs are very unpredictable, and they could well do it. They might rather see their own people suffer because they can impose disadvantages on the global economy rather than help their own economy. So it could happen, but it would be economic suicide at this moment in time if they did that.
Thank you very much, Peter. We have a breaking news coming in. Please stay with us. Reports from the region in a fresh strike against Iran say Israel has targeted the gates of Iran's infamous Evin prison in Tehran. Evin prison is known for the jailed opposition leaders of the Iranian government, hence the reported targeting of the prison. Peter, what are your thoughts on this? The Israelis striking a prison that holds the opposition, the top opposition against the current Iranian regime.
Yeah, very, very interesting move if that can be confirmed, because clearly what the Israeli authorities want more than anything else now is regime change, and opening the gates of the prison and the various opposition leaders, maybe some of them very high profile, could assist in achieving that objective. They will be the people that would promote riots, that will create chaos in the streets, and hopefully from the Israeli and the US point of view, that will be another blow to the regime in retaining control. what Israel wants more than anything else is to replace the current regime with the deposed Shah's family. And we've seen that he has already been on the diplomatic front, talking to European Union leaders, having meetings at the White House with all his staff and those people that surround him. So that is a very, very interesting and I would say pertinent development. One hopes, Thomas, I'm not being flippant here, that the strikes haven't killed those people in the Evin prison who the Israelis clearly want to see create chaos domestically.
That's a very good point. We have, thank you, Peter. Please stay with us. We've got some more information. The IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi briefed the Board of Governors this morning amid escalating concerns over Iran's nuclear program. The meeting comes just days after the US launched strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. Grossi is urging diplomacy and transparency as fears grow over a possible nuclear escalation in the region. Let's take a listen in to what the IAEA Director General had to say.
Iran, Israel, and the Middle East need peace. For that, we must take a number of steps. First of all, we must return to the negotiating table. And for that, allow IAEA inspectors, the guardians on our behalf of the NPT, to go back to Iran's nuclear sites and account for the stockpiles of uranium, including, most importantly, the 400 kilograms enriched to 60%.
Peter, that's the IAEA chief there speaking. Another person, another body asking for diplomacy in this matter, along with foreign leaders across the world. Do you see this happening?
Oh, Thomas, we've seen this. How many more times have we got to listen to politicians and diplomats and heads of NGOs talking for diplomacy, diplomacy, diplomacy? When we hear the head of the UN, Guterres, every time he makes a speech, we need peace in the world, we need peace in the world. This rhetoric, these absurd, meaningless statements aren't going to change the situation. Israel has been under threat of existence through Iran and her proxies for the last 4 or 5 decades. October the 7th, I think, was a complete strategic mistake undertaken by Hamas, because 21 months down the road, Thomas, Hamas have been, if not defeated, their ability to impose military harm on Israel has been virtually annihilated, as has Hezbollah. Syria, the proxy country of Iran, has fallen. The Houthis have tried but seemingly failed, and now Iran is under increasing pressure. And all the time we've seen diplomats and heads of the IAEA saying, "Oh, we want diplomacy, we want peace, we want..." Meaningless statements, Thomas, until Israel has finally achieved her objective. And I think in this, as has never before, she has a US president which will back her to the hilt until such time as domestically he can no longer take the pressure. Then I think the idea of a peaceful diplomatic solution is for the birds.
Peter Baum, thank you very, very much for joining us on the programme. Always a pleasure to have your insight. We now stay in the region once again for our next story, where a suicide attack in the country of Syria, in Damascus, has killed at least 22 people and injuring over 60. The attack happened during a packed service at St. Elias Church in the Dwelwa neighbourhood. According to Syrian authorities, the attacker opened fire before detonating an explosive belt. The Islamic State group has been blamed for this unprecedented assault inside a Syrian church since the civil war began in 2011. The eyewitnesses described chaos as worshippers tried to stop the attacker. First responders rushed victims to hospitals while security forces secured the area. The Syrian Interior Ministry called it a criminal, sinful bombing and vowed to investigate thoroughly. Let's have a look at what the spokesman for the Syrian Ministry of the Interior had to say.
تدين وزارة الداخلية السورية التفجير الإجرامي الآثم الذي استهدف كنيسة ماريلياس اليوم، والذي تشير المعطيات الأولية إلى كونه ناتجا عن هجوم انتحاري يتبع لتنظيم داعش. وهذه ليست المرة الأولى التي يحاول تنظيم داعش استهداف المدنيين بأعمال إجرامية فيها، فقد أحبطت وزارة الداخلية محاولتي تفجير في كل من مقام السيدة زينب وكنيسة معلولة في عمليات دقيقة ومعقدة. إننا في وزارة الداخلية نعمل مع الجهات المعنية لكشف تفاصيل الحادثة، ونعكف على استكمال التحقيقات وجمع الأدلة لتحديد هوية المنفذ.
International leaders condemned the attack and the UN envoy called it a heinous crime, while the US envoy labelled it an act of cowardice. Turkey and France also condemned the violence, again urging unity against acts like these. The Orthodox Patriarchate urged authorities to protect all civilians and prevent further violations against religious sites. Security remains a critical challenge for Syria's new government amid ongoing threats. We're now joined by Oliver, who's an advisor and coordinator to Europe, Israel Press Association and the European Jewish Association. Thank you very much for joining us, Oliver. Many countries want to see Syria involved in the world. Ever since the fall of Bashar al-Assad late last year, sanctions have been removed from the United States, but incidents like this continue to happen in the country. The Islamic State group is a huge fear. Do you think this group is re-emerging in Syria? And if so, what does this mean for stability in the region and for the future of Syria?
Well, first, I don't think that Islamic State has ever disappeared. It's a misconception when people say that. One just has to go onto the streets of Europe and one sees a lot of the IS flags being flown at the, let's say, pro-Hamas, pro-Gaza rallies.
Are you talking about the Palestinian flag?
No, the IS, the Islamic State flag tends to be flown at these demonstrations, and this is already a sign that there's support for it, and there is a sign that they have not vanished completely. This is you don't eradicate anything at 100%. The instability in Syria, of course, it hasn't changed much. The overtures of the Syrian government, of course, especially towards Israel, has shown an opening up, perhaps just taking realpolitik at its finest. You don't resist constant cooperation with your neighbors, regardless of what your political leanings are. Let's hope, I mean, this is just a big hope that the current government in Syria will continue on a moderate front. This will just have to take some time to see whether their overtures towards Israel, also with, at the moment, not making many demands on the Golan Heights, whether that really will have a long-term sustainable effect. But I think Islamic State is alive and well. The question is, will there be a vacuum left for it to grow again? And I think that will depend on what kind of security arrangements the Syrian government makes with all of the players of the region. Of course, with the United States, we hope that there will be some kind of security arrangement, particularly what will the Turks do, who are right now commanding quite a bit of the security infrastructure within Syria.
Yes, and Oliver, just to finish off, apologies, we seem to have run out of time. What does this attack say about the Syrian government's claims of security restoration post-Assad and post-conflict?
Well, I mean, I just take the example of our experiences in general. The world will never be 100% safe. There will always be a terror attack here or there. We will never eradicate any form of radicalization. Of course, that is an aim, but it requires literally starting at zero, children at very young ages, but it also requires having equal opportunities. And it's such a complicated process that we can just assume we have to deal with this. The question is, will it become a rampant problem? or is it an isolated problem? That again, it's not a question we can answer yet, simply because it hasn't happened so much at the moment. This is now a tragedy, and let's hope it becomes it's an isolated tragedy. But there's no answer for that right now. I don't think anybody could answer that honestly.
Oliver, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. We actually do have a quick update for this story. The death toll from this suicide bombing has now risen to 25. This is what Syria's state news agency Sana reported today, and citing the country's health ministry. Well, that is all we have time for today on the programme. We will continue to bring you all developing news updates from the Middle East and around the world. Thank you very much.